In the quiet town of Liberty, Missouri, whispers rode on the wind, carrying tales of a notorious outlaw whose name struck fear into the hearts of the law-abiding. Jesse James, a man of myth and legend, known for his lightning-fast draw and daring escapades, was about to etch his name in history. It was the year 1866, and as the sun rose above the horizon, casting long shadows over the sleepy streets, Jesse and his band of outlaws were about to embark on a heist that would forever change the course of American crime. Welcome to Capers and Cocktails, a true crime podcast that doesn't take itself too seriously and gives you something to enjoy while you listen. The following content may be disturbing to some. Discretion is advised. If you're enjoying one of our themed cocktails, ensure you're of legal drinking age and have fun, but drink responsibly. Jesse James was born in Clay County, Missouri on September 5th, 1847, to Zerelda and Robert James. Side note, Zerelda is just about the coolest name ever. Let's bring Zerelda back. Anyway, Jesse had an older brother, Frank, and a younger full sister named Susan. Dad Robert traveled to California during the gold rush to minister to those searching for gold. He passed away there when James was merely 3 years old. Following Robert's untimely death, his widow Zerelda remarried to Dr. Reuben Samuel in 1855. Dr. Reuben moved into the James family home, and together with Zerelda, they had 4 children: Sarah, John, Fanny, and Archie. Let's go ahead and avoid bringing back the name Fanny, though, I think. Yeah. The family, now expanded, acquired a total of 7 enslaved people who primarily worked as farmhands on the Samuels tobacco farm. When the Civil War arrived in 1861, the James Samuel family sided with the Confederates. 14-year-old Jesse watched with jealousy and frustration as his older brother Frank marched off to fight for the rebellion as a member of the Bushwhackers. The Union's Jayhawkers brought their revenge wrath down on the James family after discovering where Frank had come from. They arrived on the James Samuel farm and tortured Dr. Reuben by briefly hanging him from a tree. According to legend, they also lashed young Jesse. This event may have ignited Jesse's rebellious spirit. In the spring of 1864, at just 16 years old, the slender youth with piercing blue eyes joined a ruthless guerrilla band under the command of Bloody Bill Anderson. Together, they struck fear into pro-Union forces across the Missouri countryside. Despite his youth, Jesse took part in numerous brutal acts, including the infamous Centralia Massacre, where 22 unarmed Union soldiers and around 100 others were mercilessly slaughtered. These harrowing experiences left an indelible mark on Jesse, shaping the course of his future actions and character. As the war drew to a close, Jesse James found himself unable to let go of the ideals for which the South had fought. Instead of accepting defeat, he turned his aggression towards banks, trains, and stagecoaches. Jesse started young. Over the course of several weeks in early 1866, when Jesse was just 19 years old, he meticulously studied the Clay County Savings Association in Liberty, Missouri, also in Clay County, where he was from. Jesse was planning a robbery. However, due to his ongoing recovery from a severe bullet wound to the chest that he got just after the Civil War, he was actually unable to physically participate in the robbery. Instead, Jesse entrusted the execution of his plan to his 2 most trusted associates, his brother Frank James and Cole Younger, the leader of the notorious Younger Gang. Jesse's careful planning and attention to detail were clear in how well the robbery was organized, even though he couldn't be there himself. On February 13, 1866, a notorious gang of around 13 outlaws under the leadership of Cole and Frank rode into Liberty. They arrived at the Clay County Savings Association, a building located at 104 East Franklin Street, a block northeast of the Clay County Courthouse. It was built in 1859 and is a 2-story federal-style rectangular brick building with a gable roof. And Frank and Cole dismounted and boldly entered that building. The other 11 stayed outside. Inside the bank, Cole went and warmed himself by the stove in the middle of the bank, while Frank went up to the counter, approaching the cashier, Greenup Bird. Greenup. Seriously, another cool name in this episode. And Greenup worked at a bank. It's too good. Frank asked Greenup to break a $10 bill, but as he opened the register with no muss or fuss, the robber swiftly drew a pistol, pressing it menacingly against Greenup's startled face, and then pistol whipped him. At the same time, his partner vaulted over the counter, pointing his gun at Greenup's son, William, who was the only other person in the bank. This sudden move heightened the fear and tension inside the bank. I mean, obviously, making the situation even more intense. With their pistols aimed at father and son, the robbers demanded that all the money in the bank, including a tin box of government bonds, gold, and tax stamps, be placed into a grain sack. The total haul amounted to a little over $60,000, which in today's buying power would equal over $1.2 million. Dollars, that is. After securing the loot, the thieves herded the birds into the vault, shut the heavy door, and swiftly made their escape to where their horses and the rest of the gang awaited. Remarkably, the entire heist was executed in under 15 minutes. The robbers, unaware that simply closing the vault door wasn't enough to keep the birds in, hastily left the scene. Father and son, realizing their opportunity, pushed the vault door open and ran out of it and to a bank window, shouting, "Robbery!" Their cries attracted the attention of two nearby men, S.H. Holmes and George Wymore, who witnessed the gang's escape. As the gang noticed S.H. and George, they fired their guns into the air in an attempt to scare them off. One of the gang members, Arch Clements, took a more aggressive approach and fired a shot directly at S.H., narrowly missing him but hitting his coat. Undeterred, S.H. and George began to chase the gang, but according to the Kansas City Journal, George Wymore, a 19-year-old student at nearby William Jewell College, quote, was without any sort of provocation whatever, inhumanly and mercilessly shot down by the robbers and instantly killed, end quote. With the tragic events unfolding before them, the gang quickly mounted their horses and rode away. They were pursued after a while by a posse of outraged townspeople who could procure arms and horses. This robbery, while seeming reckless, marked a significant moment in American history. While banks had been targets for criminals before, this heist was the first of its kind. It was brazen and it was in the middle of the day, and it would set a precedent for future criminals. And like criminals are off to do, let's make a drink that Jesse and his gang might have enjoyed after their first in America history crime, robbing a bank in broad daylight. Okay, this drink might have a history that's as much of a tall tale as a lot of stories about old Western bank heisters, but it's a good one, so I'm going to tell it anyway. I couldn't find a history of how the drink got its start, but I do know that legend has it that Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys were big fans of the drink. Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys were a militia formed in the late 1760s in New Hampshire, originally organized to keep the state of New York out of their land. Later on, the group went to fight in the American Revolution. Shortly after the battles of Lexington and Concord in 1775, some of the Green Mountain Boys and Ethan, their leader, gathered at the Catamount Tavern in Bennington, New Hampshire, where they planned out their attack on Fort Ticonderoga, a British garrison. They drank many a stone fence to boost their courage that night, but as it turns out, not much courage was needed, as the fort was not well defended. The Green Mountain Boys quickly captured the lone sentry on duty with no violence and plundered the fort's liquor storage to get more booze for more stone fences cocktails, naturally. To make our stone fence, we're going to add 1 part bourbon, 3 parts apple cider. You can do non-alcoholic or alcoholic apple cider, your choice. Half a part lemon juice, half a part maple syrup, and 3 dashes of bitters to our shaker, filled with ice, of course, and shake until chilled and combined. Then we will strain over fresh ice. The mocktail version of the drink is exactly the same, except for replacing the bourbon with a non-alcoholic whiskey and, of course, using non-alcoholic apple cider. Quick reminder that all the ingredients for the drinks each week are in the description box below, and I do also link my favorite non-alcoholic spirits there. Drink up and get ready to rob the next bank. The evening of the robbery, the Liberty Tribune proclaimed, quote, "The murderers and robbers are believed by many citizens and the officers of the bank to be a gang or old bushwhacking desperados, but it makes no difference who they are or who they claim to be. They should be swung up in the most summary matter. Robbing and murdering must be stopped, and if it requires severe medicine to do it, so be it. Desperate cases require desperate remedies, and we believe our people are in a humor to make short work of such characters in the future. The people of Clay County want peace and safety, and they are going to have it," end quote. I think they may have been busting out their guns in Liberty for at least a while after this crime. Neighborhood watch, I guess. A few days following the botched robbery, Jesse James wrote a letter to the family of George Wymore expressing his sincere regret for the tragic loss of life during the heist. In the heartfelt message, Jesse made it clear that he never intended for anyone to be harmed and that the violence was never part of the plan. This letter is actually a rare glimpse into the mind of the outlaw and suggests a sense of remorse and humanity often overlooked in the legend of Jesse James. Since Jesse was a relative unknown, the letter is likely authentic, and given the circumstances, as in recovering from a damn chest wound, it means that though Jesse didn't pull any triggers in this robbery, he likely planned the heist. The bank put up a $5,000 reward for the return of the stolen money, but efforts to track down the robbers were hampered by heavy snow that covered their tracks. As I read earlier, local newspapers did suggest that the robbery was the doing of former Confederate bushwhackers. That's just what they were. Despite some townspeople recognizing the robbers, fear kept them from coming forward with information. The thieves managed to evade capture, and none of the stolen money was ever recovered. The bank settled with its customers for 60 cents on their deposited dollar, because this was a time before deposit insurance was available. The bank eventually went out of business. Today, the Clay County Savings Association building is listed in the U.S. National Register of Historic Places and operates as the Jesse James Bank Museum. The Liberty robbery was the first in a series of similar robberies executed with the precision and often the ruthlessness of a wartime raid, which began in Missouri and eventually spread to neighboring states during the tumultuous Reconstruction era. It is estimated that Jesse James and his gang were involved in at least 20 robberies, and he was directly or indirectly involved in the deaths of at least a dozen people during his lifetime. With the help of John Newman Edwards, a former Confederate soldier and newspaper editor, throughout his short life, Jesse James actually carefully crafted his own heroic image of himself as a Southern fighter. He portrayed himself as a modern-day Robin Hood, standing up for the poor Missourians who suffer under Republican rule. Through letters published by that newspaper editor, Jesse defended himself against accusations of specific crimes while embracing the broader outlaw persona. He famously stated, quote, "We are not thieves. We are bold robbers. I am proud of the name, for Alexander the Great was a bold robber, and Julius Caesar, and Napoleon Bonaparte," end quote. Woof. However, despite his claims of generosity, there is no concrete evidence, or really evidence whatsoever, that Jesse ever did the second half of what Robin Hood was known to do, share his stolen wealth with the less fortunate. Jesse James's own life of crime came to a violent end on April 3, 1882, when the 35-year-old was shot and killed by Robert Ford, a member of his own gang. Jesse had been living under the alias Thomas Howard and had settled in St. Joseph, Missouri, where he was planning his next robbery. Robert was all too happy to conspire with Missouri's governor to hunt the outlaw down and collect a $10,000 reward, so he shot Jesse in the back of the head while he was dusting a picture on the wall. Jesse James's legacy is one of infamy and folklore, a mix of fact and fiction, that has immortalized him as a symbol of the Wild West. His daring escapades and ability to evade capture for so long captured the imagination of the public and cemented his place in American history. Thanks for hanging out with me. There's nothing like a good old-fashioned bank heist, am I right? And if there's anything better than a good old-fashioned heist, it's a good old-fashioned cult. And we've got one next week. Just a warning that it's pretty hard to find cults out there that aren't like super awful and really take us out of the realm of lighthearted capers. Cults are just kind of awful. But I know that a lot of us are fascinated by them, me included, so I'm going to keep sprinkling them in. If they're not your thing, that's okay. Feel free to skip a week. I'll be here when you come back. Speaking of coming back, I'll see you next week. And remember, there are always alternatives to bank robbery. Period.